Back on NBC 10 at Issue with former Congressman Pat Toomey, leading candidate for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. Thanks for being here, Congressman.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Let's pick up on where we were, but I want to stop and ask you something really quickly here. You ran 3 times for Congress, so
right.
and you term limited yourself. You said,
right.
that's all I'm going to do.
Right.
Would you term limit yourself as a senator?
I might. I'm going to give that some thought. I do think that term limits are fundamentally more important in the House, and the reason I believe that is because, of course, House districts get gerrymandered. And unfortunately, we have a system today where politicians pick their constituents sometimes instead of the other way around.
So you haven't ruled it out, but are you less likely to do it?
So, well, I think it's less important in the Senate where you have the boundaries are determined by the state boundaries and they're not subject to gerrymandering.
All right. Getting back to health care for a moment, you've got a couple of town hall debate sessions next week. It's coming up tomorrow, Monday night, the Acquire building. It's a radio one, a smorgasbord of people. Don't know how much anybody's going to get a chance to talk on that, but we'll see. The one Wednesday, though, at Muhlenberg College, it's just you and Joe Sestak.
Right.
And how are you going to beat him? How are you going to win that debate?
Well, we're going to have a discussion. We're going to have two very, very different opposing views. I mean, Joe's a very liberal guy, and he has a very liberal set of ideas that he wants to advocate. He's a big believer in having a huge presence on the part of the government in running health care. I disagree. I think we're better off having a lot of choices for individuals. I think we actually ought to be moving in the direction where individuals get to have their own insurance policy that's independent of their employer. Much more flexibility, more choices, better suited for individual families. So we're going to have a discussion about the benefits of more freedom and flexibility, which I advocate for, and bigger government that Joe advocates.
Well, let's pick up on that. Congressman Sestak was here last week, and I told him what you have said about him, that he's out of the mainstream, that he's to the left, and here was his response. Let's take a look and listen.
If I believe in health care for everyone, like my daughter had when she had her brain cancer, call me outside the mainstream or inside. If you want to characterize me as one who believes that every child should have an opportunity to go to college by having savings and by the government, if they're disenfranchised, call me outside or in the mainstream. If you believe, as Vice Chairman of the Small Business Committee, that we should have tax cuts for small businesses to incentivize more job, call me conservative, liberal, pragmatic, anything. The issue here is I'm for the working family.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I think Joe kind of shifted the focus a little bit. I think we all want to see people have opportunities, and we want to see everybody have good quality health care and education and an expanding economy. The question is, how do we achieve it? And Joe thinks we achieve it by a big and powerful federal government that launches programs, raises taxes, and runs it. I think we do it more through personal freedom and a free enterprise system.
But going back then to your time in Congress in the late 90s, there was a movement which you were a part of to try to deregulate further the financial industry, to try to, the argument was we would lift the chains and there'd be more entrepreneurship, there'd be more creativity, and there'd be more growth. Many people now look at those moves in the 90s as the government not overseeing the industry as it should, and therefore a lot of the crisis that developed over the last few years and that we're in now is due to lack of regulation, and that you and others were responsible for that.
Well, you've got to be very careful about the kind of regulations we're talking about. First of all, many of us felt that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac ought to be more vigorously regulated because we recognize that ultimately the taxpayers were on the hook, and it was the Democrats in Congress who pushed back very aggressively, refused that. Barney Frank, who famously said, I want to roll the dice with Fannie Mae. Well, we rolled the dice and we see how that ended up. The big deregulation bill that I supported was a bill that I think actually, having passed, signed into law by Bill Clinton, passed in the Senate with, I think, 92 votes in the U.S. Senate, was a bill that did one big thing, and that was it allowed banks and securities firms to affiliate together under a common umbrella holding company. That helped us get through last fall, because if it hadn't been for that bill, I'm not sure at all that Morgan Stanley could have become a bank, that Goldman Sachs could have become a bank, or that Merrill Lynch could have sold itself to Bank of America. That bill made it possible to have that restructuring which was necessary. And if we hadn't had that bill, I don't think we could have. And it's important to note that that bill did nothing to allow banks to engage in any kind of securities activity that they weren't already doing with respect to mortgage-related
So you're saying in your time in
securities.
Congress, you feel very comfortable with any decisions you made regarding derivatives or anything that
Yeah,
could
I think those bills were constructive, and I think the folks in the Clinton administration who supported that will defend it vigorously today.
I'll talk about Arlen Specter and more when we get right back. More on the race for Senate in Pennsylvania in a moment on NBC 10.
You're watching NBC 10 at Issue.